19. The weather fine in the north, unsettled further south, a high of 22 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. The roads are very wet after all the heavy rain, so as a result there's only one lane open on the A312 southbound between the Ballsbridge roundabout at Hayes and the M4. Also on the A316 in Sunbury, the westbound exit slip road is closed at the A308. Also problems on the A13, the eastbound exit slip road at the Stamford La Hope turn-off is closed. That's also because of flooding, and very slow westbound to Alston. In fact, there are queues now of about 5 miles. And on the trains, there are severe delays on the DLR between Lewisham and Mudchute, and minor delays between Mudchute and Bank.
LBC.
The 7 to
Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Right now at Talk Talk.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
9 minutes before 8 is the time. We will return to our conversation about Matt Hancock and his farewell and seeming unable to say the word sorry or apology in any way in a moment. But to other matters, other government matters. And writing in one of the newspapers today, the Secretary of State for Justice, or Justice Secretary Robert Buckland, says, "I share the frustrations of many Daily Mail readers that Colin Pitchfork could soon be out of prison. His were the gravest of crimes which left 2 families in unimaginable grief." He was, of course, the double paedophile murder in Leicester who was looking as though he might get parole. Robert Buckland joins me now. Well, it, of course, falls to you as Secretary of State for Justice. You can do something about it. So what are you doing about it? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nick. Indeed, I have a power to order or to ask the parole board, to reconsider the decision that they've made. Now, that power relates to particularly restricted grounds as to whether I or the Secretary of State holding my office would think that the parole board had acted unreasonably or irrationally. I've looked at this carefully, taken the fullest advice, and have decided in these circumstances to refer the matter back to the parole board for their reconsideration.
What's the timeline on that, Secretary of State? How long will this take?
Well, it's very much a matter for them. I've acted within the 21-day period that I'm given in order to ask for reconsideration. It's now for the board themselves to consider all the issues. I can't speak for them as to how long they would take. I would hope that they would deal with it as swiftly and as fairly as possible.
Of course, this plays in to the role of the probation service, and I understand that you and your colleagues are working to review that as well.
Yes, indeed. In fact, more than that, I've announced, and in fact today is the first day of the new probation service, which covers all of England and Wales. It brings together the entire probation workforce. I've been recruiting more probation officers, 1,000 in the last year, 1,500 next year. I'm doing that because these people are in the forefront of the fight against crime. They're there to supervise and to work with offenders, to work with the police and other agencies to cut that cycle of crime. And that's why I'm investing more in drug rehabilitation programs and indeed investing 200 million in charities and other organisations that work with offenders in order to reduce that cycle and to break that cycle of criminality.
Well, can I put it to you then that there's clearly a reform is on for the probation service. Some would argue we need to reform the parole board, Secretary of State.
Well, indeed, I'm conducting a root and branch review of the parole board. I'll make announcements in the next few months about that. I think that they do some very sensitive and important work. It's difficult work, but I think that the time is now right for further reform to be undertaken, and I will make announcements later in the year.
So that will be by year end. We'll hear more on the way the parole board is constituted, yeah?
Definitely.
OK. Next week, many were hoping that we might see some restrictions lifted next Monday. The mood music seems to now be dialing that down, and we look forward in every sense of the word, chronologically and emotionally, to July the 19th. Is that your understanding, Mr. Buckland?
Well, look, I think that it's right that we all have that desire to make the 19th the final day of all of this. But like at all stages of this crisis, we have to look at the data. And that's why the roadmap said, June the 21st at the earliest. Clearly, at that point, it would have been wrong for us to unlock. I think that the key data really is that link between vaccination and hospitalisation. If that, if it's emerging increasingly, that link can be broken by vaccination. If that is the case, then that does mean that we are able to move to the next stage. But, like I said, Nick, you'd expect me and other ministers to look carefully at the data rather than just making a knee-jerk reaction in a desire to please everybody. That would be the wrong approach, and we're not taking we're not going down that avenue in this instance.
You talk about how you and your colleagues work. How much has confidence in your efforts been dented by the Matt Hancock episode?
Well, look, I don't think anybody can deny that it's been a deeply unfortunate and unwelcome episode. He did the right thing by stepping down. It's essential that government ministers are able to, with credibility, deliver important messages to the public. He recognised that, and that's why it was the right decision.
Right. What checks have been made into how his colleague Gina Coladangelo was hired?
Well, can I say that all those sort of public appointments are made with according to an agreed procedure. The Cabinet Office are responsible for it. Public appointments have to be vetted. They have to be scrutinised. A minister can't just, pick up the phone and bring somebody in. It's got to be done properly. And any connections or conflicts need to be declared. And I would have expected that in this instance that was done.
OK. You would have expected, but nobody's checked.
Well, look, it's not for me to check, but I'm pretty sure that those issues will be looked at in order to make sure that due process was carried out.
Can you tell me, hand on heart, you're confident due process was carried out, Mr. Buckland?
Well, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't, Nick. I mean, I expect in every case due process to be carried out, otherwise the appointment shouldn't be made.
Another of your colleagues with you work closely with is Priti Patel. There's this idea of new laws next week to enable the government to send asylum seekers abroad for processing, talks with Denmark over building or sharing a centre in Africa. Do you have any more detail on that, Mr. Buckland?
Well, that's only a report that I've seen as well this morning, Nick. What I can tell you is that indeed new legislation will be coming forward now that we've left the EU. Of course, the way in which we deal with immigration and borders can be very different. And we don't have to make a distinction between EU and non-EU citizens. We can deal with people equally. And it's important that we focus on those who make millions out of the misery of human trafficking and really go for the organised crime that is often at the heart of this exploitation. And that's what the Home Secretary wants to do. That's what I want to do. And you'll see a bold package of measures coming forward very shortly in order to try and deal with this issue.
Just a last couple of questions on the Matt Hancock issue. Were you Prime Minister, would you have fired him, Mr. Buckland?
Well, look, I think the Prime Minister, like the rest of us, heard about the story, and Matt Hancock was gone the day after. I don't think that when you look back at this, you'll say that that was anything other than a swift resignation.
36 hours? Surely straight away he needed to be fired. Well, you look at his actions, you look at Dominic Cummings' actions. Mr. Buckland, what does it take to be fired in this government?
Look, Matt Hancock went. He stepped down. He resigned, and rightly so. I don't think that when we look back at this, we will be worrying about whether it was in hour 1 or hour 12 or whatever it was. The decision was made, and it was the right one.
And he didn't say sorry, Mr. Hancock, in his address, 1 minute, 20 seconds, from, I assume, his back garden. It might be his front garden, I have no idea. Not a word of sorry, regret or apology. Do you think that was right?
Well, I think laced through that statement was deep regret and humiliation, frankly, about what happened. I don't think anybody got the sense that he was ebullient and trying to brave it out. And the man had just resigned from high office. I think he has paid a very heavy price for a mistake that we all recognise undermined his credibility.
Not for a moment suggesting anything inappropriate. Do you know where the cameras are in your office, Mr. Buckland, or how many there are?
Well, Nick, I've asked the question, and I've got cameras downstairs in the foyer, as you'd expect. There aren't CCTV cameras in my office because, frankly, the function of cameras in a building like that should be about security and making sure that only authorised people can come in and out. So I'm satisfied in what I've established that we don't have that type of system, though I'm sure that a lot of ministers are thinking, well, we better make sure our officers are safe so that we don't have unauthorised or enemy, or sort of people who are hostile to the UK snooping in on us. Just
begs the question why they were in Mr. Hancock's office, of course, Mr. Buckland.
Well, that's a matter for the health department. I'm sure that they're looking into it, and I'm sure that answers will be forthcoming as to why that was there. Grateful for your time today. Good luck with the review and the reform that's going on of the probation service, and also with your decision concerning Colin Pitchfork. Thank you for your time. That's Robert Buckland, Justice Secretary, appearing here on LBC, where at 8 o'clock news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the new Health Secretary Sajid Javid will update MP